really in studio today, but we're hanging out with Rene. He happens to be selling some of his motorcycle tours at the Edmonton Motorcycle Show. Rene is the best-selling author of this book right here, The University of Gravel Roads. He's also an advisor to the 𝗔𝗯cie Memorial Foundation.
I'm on the 𝗔𝗯cie Committee of Advisors. 𝗔𝗯cie Foundation.
Okay, just want to make sure I got that right. And is now hosting motorcycle trips around the planet, which is what he's here selling for. And so I actually read Rene's book twice before I went on my trip from here to Argentina. And then yesterday I was at the motorcycle show and I saw Rene and I was like, oh my god, I read your book twice before I left. And oddly we had some of the same experiences as we went. So I want to come back and ask you some questions about the trip and see what it's like in life after the first around the world journey and what you're up to now. How's the trade show going?
It's been slow and steady for us, which is good. Sometimes trade shows are too busy, and what we do is what we talk about is traveling around the world, both sort of on a dirtbag level, which we have done, and also on the guided tours, which is a bit fancier level. But both of those require 5 or 10 minutes or 15 minutes to talk about. So if the show is too busy, it's not super advantageous to us because there's people that I just can't get to. So, you know, the ShamWow guy, he wants a busy show. It's like $20, ShamWow. That's not the case for us. So we like it slow and steady. And we can't judge the success of a show. Well, we can only use 42 metrics. And if we talk the entire time, it's great. And if we give away lots of brochures, it's great. So we're on track to having a great show. And the other advantage for us here is we have a lot of alumni riders who have come by and said hello. And then the third advantage for the Edmonton show specifically for us is I grew up in Fort Saskatchewan, so so we've got lots of friends. And now it's actually the sons and daughters of people I went to school with come by and say hi.
Oh, awesome!
It's pretty cool.
That's like a family event.
Family event.
So set the scene a little bit. In 2003, you set off on a trip around the world.
You got it.
With a pretty loose plan, from what I understand from reading the book. And then it took you 5 years to complete that journey, give or take, 4.5, something like that. 154,000 kilometers, 41 countries. That's a hell of a trip. So I read the book, obviously. I think I've read it 3 times now, and I kind of get the gist of it because I lived that life a little bit too. Before you left, what was your actual end goal? Did you have one, or was it up in the air?
Well, no, there wasn't really one other than I sold everything that I owned in my physical world, and I generated about $30,000 US. And I, from the research that I was doing on the internet, I figured I can get away with traveling for $25 a day. So I just did the math. $25 a day times a year is $9,100. So I've got 3 years of traveling, and then I went. So I figured I could do a loop in 3 years. And your experience probably mirrors mine. That once you get onto the road, it's just like
it doesn't work that way.
It's just so great to be on the road, going slow and hanging out in places and getting to know people and places. And so at the end of 2.5 years, I'm having a great time. But I hadn't even completed South America yet.
Right. Oh, same. Okay, exactly the same as me.
So I ended up coming back to Edmonton, sleeping on my brother's couch for a year and doing all sorts of odd jobs in order to generate money for the second half of the trip, which took another 2 years. And
you were able to make enough money in that amount of time to stretch it out again to last another 2.5 years on the road.
But I'd gotten pretty good at being sort of dirtbag traveler and knowing what I was comfortable in spending and what I wasn't. So by that point, I was comfortable rough sleeping, or coaching campsites, which I was uncomfortable doing in the U.S. and in Mexico because I wasn't sure how the whole place worked. Worried about safety, all the stuff that people typically tell you that
it's awful or scary or all this stuff. You believe it for the first 3 months,
and then sort of you repeat it for hundreds of days of nothing bad happening, and you're forced to believe that it's the truth.
Right. And then you get to say Colombia, but at that point you're throwing your tent in the ditch and sleeping in people's backyards, and it's kind of
sleeping by the train tracks, having great sleep.
Life is easy. So of those 41 countries, and based on all the stuff you were told, which one do you think was the most surprising from a motorcycle perspective?
There was Tajikistan in Central Asia that I didn't even know existed before we started looking at that part of the trip. So that was a pleasant surprise for me. The ride, it was difficult to get to, but that sometimes makes the reward of getting there all that much sweeter. But the riding was spectacular, the scenery was great, and the fact that I'd learned something about that part of the world I didn't know before held a certain appeal. I ended up enjoying places where there weren't many people, as a general rule. So Mongolia, being the least densely populated country in the world, was a real memorable one. It's the one that's on the front cover of the book. Namibia is the second is number 2 on that list. So we enjoyed traveling in Namibia, Patagonia. Is great. So basically places where you can sort of dream and fantasize of what this place was like 100 years ago before we got there. And then trying to avoid big cities. That was my personal style of travel, and I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, I found that the welcomeness of a small town area was sort of universal around the world.
Yeah.
As long as I stuck to that pattern, then people were sort of your best friend.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a universal truth. Country mouse probably has a bit more time for you than city mouse.
Yeah.
You can just imagine someone stopping you here on the road on 118th and asking you for directions, and you might be a bit hurried, but someone stops you at the same place. I don't know, somewhere rural or Elk Island Park, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably have a little time.
Sit down for a coffee, they'll tell you how to get there. Yeah, right, you got the whole day.
That's, I think, pretty typical.
And so from the motorcycle perspective too, of all the countries you went through, was there one you ever actually felt in danger in?
No. And that's an important part of the story that doesn't often get emphasized enough, in my opinion, is that
no one talks about it.
No one talks about it because it's boring.
Yeah.
So a guy's on a trip around the world, he had a nice time.
Yeah.
That's not leading news story stuff, but it is in the fact that we're sort of misled into. You certainly had this as well. People commenting to you where it was the most dangerous part.
Yeah, it's probably number 2 question I get asked, maybe best part and then worst part.
Yeah, the fascinating thing is that they actually skip the question of was there a dangerous part.
Yeah.
And they automatically launch into the second half of the question, which they assume it was, and then you just tell me where it was.
Yeah.
So I tell, especially in the U.S., because there's one bullet hole in the motorcycle.
Yeah, right.
Which is it's not a really dangerous story.
Where that came about though is shockingly important, I think.
Right. So we do a lot of talking for BMW dealerships and events, and I put the map of the trip up. And I get people to guess where the bullet hole came from.
Yeah, right.
And I've traveled through Yemen, and Iran, and Bolivia, and Russia, and all places that were kind of hotspots.
On the list of top 5 worst. Yeah.
And nobody guesses that it was from Utah in the USA.
From Utah, of all places.
And then everyone goes, oh yeah, of course it was America.
Yeah.
And then, so especially if we do this talk in the U.S., it's like, man, as long as I get out of the U.S., things are fine. But it's important to tell people that 155,000 kilometers, nothing stolen from me, no threat of personal injury to myself. I've never been ripped off. Or if I was ripped off, they did a great job, and still to this day I don't know that it happened. And more often than not, the challenge is especially in more dodgy countries where there's not a lot of tourism, like Iran. The challenge is every half an hour you're getting pulled over because someone wants to know where are you from, comfort tea. My uncle moved to Toronto. Do you know him? Like oh.
Can you take him something?
Yeah,
Here it is.
It's great. It was really, really, really great. But no one talks about that because it's not exciting.
It's not the same.
No one is kidnapped. No one is. That kind of stuff.
No one's ever made the front page of the Globe and Mail for a cup of tea they got handed to them in a Mongolian yurt.
And it's actually sad because those are actually, considering how opposite public perception is of those kind of events. It's a hugely missed story. But my voice is small and your voice is small compared to Fox News and internet experts. So I'll just keep doing my thing and telling my story, and for the people who are interested in it, it'll land in fertile soil, and for people who have already made up their mind about the rest of the world, it won't land there. But I can't change that. So I just tell my 5 seconds.
Roll on with life. So when I got back, a friend of mine asked me something that I was a little bit surprised for. He didn't ask me about the countries I went to, didn't ask me everything else. I lived probably the similar way you did, in a tent and off my bike and in whatever derelict campgrounds or showered in a river or whatever. And one day we're working side by side, he looks at me, he's like, where did you shit? And I was like, that's your question? And so I actually thought about it, and I'm like, actually one day I was in Bolivia, and I just like, I'm like, oh my god, like I don't know, maybe it was a soup I ate the night before or whatever, and I'm like, I'm gonna shit in my motorcycle pants right there, and I don't know, and I'm like, oh man, but I'm getting pretty used to like going to the bush for that point. So I just hopped off my bike, thinking I'm in the middle of nowhere, ran into the bush, wanted to do my business, and came up, and there's 2 guys on horseback who were just outside the thing looking at my bike, and I'm like, oh fuck, I got my pants hacked up in the bush. So I told them, I'm like, well, I pretty much shit wherever I had to, basically. Did you find that it became sort of more custom to just dealing with things as they arose? Or
so that's actually turns into a common thing on the road. And one of the things that helps it is I ate quite a bit less on the road because the more that's going in, the more that's coming out.
Yeah.
And my body got quite good at. If there was not a good place to stop and have it done, my system could actually hang on for a day or two. Yeah, and then otherwise it's just after coffee in the morning.
Yeah, right.
Kind of plan it that way.
The Colombian coffee comes in.
But I got pretty good. I got pretty good at doing the one shoe poo, which is taking the boot off and the leg off. One shoe poo. So I'll actually do a video on it sometime. Put up on YouTube.
That's so good. Yeah, you totally should. That's awesome.
But there's some technique to it to make sure it doesn't go.
Yeah,
sideways.
it doesn't go sideways. Yeah, for sure. So if someone was to go up to you and ask you for like one piece of kit advice you could take with you to travel around the world, what would be like the one essential thing you could pack in your little stash of kit?
Yeah, I don't think there is one. Because I've met travelers who have done everything on the expensive side. I've met travelers who have done it with full ghetto run, with borrowed bikes and hard hats and running shoes, and the stuff doesn't matter. And I feel that way for motorcycle riding too. Like, I'm not so fascinated with what the motorcycle is. I'm more fascinated with what the motorcycle allows me to do.
Yeah, for sure.
So the bike itself doesn't matter. And people started getting into horsepower and torque specifications and that kind of stuff. And I don't pay too much attention to that stuff.
They go up the hill, perfect.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, there's going to be something funny, funky, and cool out that way that we can probably explore. So I think more often than that stuff, it's just going to be the right attitude. Right? It's going to be a fun, spirited attitude about when things start to go sideways, which is all the time. That it is approached with with a smile and a chuckle and a laughing. Man, this thing's going sideways.
Fast.
And it won't be entirely possible to do that all the time when you're not feeling well or it's raining all day. There's some difficult times. But that is the value of motorcycle travel. Is that those euphoria peaks are more rewarding when you've gone through some troughs that have been pretty rough. And that means just from weather and maybe motorcycle things or
away from family, low on money, things are breaking down. Grinding on the road.
But then it always works out. You meet fun people, and then you get to then those highs.
So at the end of the book, I know you wrote it a while ago, but the end of the book sort of leaves with the cliffhanger of the girl in South Africa and what you're doing with your life. And so after you came back, I presume you're in Edmonton for a while. Where does the story go from there? So
I came back in October of 2009, and I had to wait for a little while because I traveled with a carnet. So when I came back to Canada, that was $5,500 Canadian wrapped up in the carnet, and I needed to wait for that to come back. So as soon as I came back, that's what it was. That was my seed money for the rest of my life, whatever it was going to be. So with that money, I flew back to Cape Town to see that girl. And then I said, okay, are we going to get this thing or go or not? Because this long distance relationship is bonkers. So we decided, no, we're going to give it a go. So I invited her to the Edmonton Vancouver Motorcycle Show, which would have been the third week of January.
That's a big ask.
Yep. So she flew to Vancouver, and then we traveled by car to Edmonton. Now Vancouver in winter was reasonable. It was green and a bit gloomy and wet. But now coming over the pass and through Jasper and into Edmonton, it's like, she's like, what's all this snow? Oh, this is very unusual, I said. This normally never happens. So anyway, she believed me for a while, and we ended up getting married in March of 2010.
In Canada?
In Edmonton, at the Moutarde Conservatory.
Actually, right across the road, basically.
Because there's nowhere nice to get married in March. And we wanted to get married quickly because we wanted to get her visa stuff started. So we ended up getting married the first day of spring in 2010. And then we went to Africa that year, and we got married the first day of their spring down outside of Cape Town.
Awesome.
So her mother has a primate sanctuary, so we got married in front of the chimps, and all the kids had sunflowers and edible flowers. So we did sort of a mini wedding, and then we did flowers for the chimps.
Amazing. And
that was a good gig, and that was 10 years ago.
Married the girl. Moved to South Africa?
We had sort of multiple lives at that point. So we had a storage locker in South Africa, we had a storage locker in Edmonton, we had a storage locker in Penticton, and we basically house sat and rented at different places for 7 years. During those 7 years, we had two boys that were born, and they were both born in Cape Town.
Great.
And people actually ask that one because Canada's healthcare system is quite great.
Yeah.
And they said, why would you go to South Africa and pay to have the kids born there when they could have it done here for free? And we thought a lot about that, and my position was that. Well, let me do it this way. Where were you born?
I was born in Canada.
Okay, whereabouts?
In Innisfail, which is
pretty close to here. Okay, so let's say you're traveling in South America and you open the newspaper and you read a story about Innisfail.
Yeah.
You've got to read it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the place where you popped out on this earth.
Yeah.
So I think we have connections, innate connections to the place that we were born.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So we knew that the boys would likely be in Canada for the majority of their growing up. So they're going to know about hockey and lacrosse and Tim Hortons and Louis Riel and that's a big company. Like all of that stuff that comes with
being here.
growing up in Canada. But what I didn't want to risk is that I didn't want to risk them losing that connection to their mom's African heritage.
Right. Yeah.
So we paid to have both boys born in Cape Town so that they can properly say like they're African. They are fully African and they have that connection to Colette and her Afrikaans heritage.
Yeah.
That is going to I think balance better with the stuff that they live there.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's going to be a more balanced approach to their heritage than being born in Canada to an African.
That's some quite forward thinking, actually.
Yeah, it was pretty. A lot of red wine behind that one, I'm sure.
For a guy who left on a motorcycle trip with no plan, the forward thinking of planning out my kids' lives is pretty impressive.
Yeah. So they're 4 and 7 now, and so they speak Afrikaans and they speak English.
Yeah.
And they have 2 passports, so they're in a position.
Yeah. And so you started doing motorcycle tours from there. I'm just looking so right behind us here is trips you started to Africa, Mongolia, South America, Canada.
Yeah.
Did the seed start in South Africa then?
Seed started in South Africa. So the thing was, we finished the trip. Now what do? You have to do something. And was I going to go back to Rockshows, which was the company that I had left before traveling, and that whole corporate world, I was done with. Being away for so long, that's multiple years away from this consumer environment, and you can really see the downside of what it.
I just have a segue question then too. So after you came back from 5 years on the road, because I know how I dealt with it or felt about it, how did you actually feel integrating back into normal life? Good, even, depressed, happy, sad, mad?
It's a bit depressed on the surface because everyone around me is getting second houses, third cars, and I'm living in a friend's basement in Sherwood Park, unfinished.
This is my life right now. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, and I borrowed a car. Got a car from a friend of a friend. It was a Mazda 323 with 380,000 kilometers on it.
Yeah, exactly. I have a white bag with 300.
I couldn't park in the driveway because I leaked oil, so I had to always park on the street.
That's so good.
Yeah, and then, but then again, at the same point, it's like all those people that I see. I don't know if that is debt financing. I don't know if how many mortgages are on.
Yeah, right.
And then I just had to kind of shake myself for 3 seconds. Like it wasn't much, but it was initial. Certainly, I've given up my 30s. I started at 33, ended 39.
Yeah.
And all that income generating potential.
Yeah. Sort of like your peaking years of your career oriented.
Everyone says. To do this trip and I come back with zero.
Yeah.
Well, 5,500 Canadian dollars. But I got over that quite quickly.
Yeah.
And was able to do something else. And the only thing that we could do we thought was to do guided tours in Southern Africa. So that's what we started back in 2010.
Yeah. And so obviously you started doing it. Instantly the money started rolling in. Life was easy.
Yeah, man. Had we been clever, we would have abandoned ship along.
Oh, really? You would have actually abandoned ship?
For sure, because there's no money. There were 3 reasons, maybe 4, that the company succeeded for the first 5 years. One, I used to living on $25 a day. Yeah. So I wasn't afraid of being poor.
Yeah.
Having no money was not.
That's not scary. Was there having money? It's really
and
not scary.
And it wasn't a stigma attached to that either.
Yeah.
So I'm happy driving my shitty car and shopping at Goodwill and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that didn't have a connection to my self-worth.
Yeah.
The second one, I don't know how Colette looked past that, but anyway, that's her story.
I love this guy. Nothing else matters. I love this guy. Holy fuck, I hope he makes some money soon.
The other one was, we had lived on so little money that even that first year, I think we made $4,000 or so.
Yeah.
Thousands. We're making thousands and thousands of dollars. It was actually a cool thing. And then the other one was we started in 2009 technically, and the South African rand to Canadian dollar was quite a low rate. And then every year that we ran the tours, the rate on the foreign exchange world got better.
Okay.
So it wasn't anything that we did, because we did lots of screwing up with pricings and that kind of stuff way back when. But every year, the foreign exchange spread kept us afloat. So by the year 5, by which point any normal person with a business background would have abandoned ship. Then it actually turned around, because then we had enough repeat business and customers coming on tour that we could actually support ourselves. And then from year 5 to year 10, so it's getting better and better. But I don't think I can't recommend it. Well, I mean, everyone do what you want, but it takes a lot of faith to fly on that. And I don't know, because I'm 40 now. I'm 40. I mean, $4,000 as a 40-year-old. That doesn't come out at a Christmas party. Where'd you go for Christmas? How much you making this year?
How's your stock exchange portfolio? I put $1 in this year, and I put another $1 in my RSP, and $1 to the kids.
I round up. So it was a tough go. We've get zero regrets on anything that we've done.
And so this is it now. This is the future. This is
we have some other cool stuff coming now, but we're super busy now with bringing Canadians, or North Americans, I would say, to the world. And the places that we chose to ride were all places that I found exquisite on my solo trip. And we decided a long time ago also that we're only going to ride in places that we have a demonstrable reason for. So the Africa connection is pretty clean for us. Mongolia, I spent a lot of time there. It's on the front cover of the book. In South America, the lead guide is John Welburn, who's married to an Argentinian girl. So he lives a lot of time down there. And Williams Lake is from Williams Lake.
Great. So that's outdoors.
And then Canada. So after 9 years of bringing Canadians or North Americans to the world, we now decided, let's start showing off Canada. So now we're in the process of bringing Canada to international riders.
I saw it on your route map there. There's a trip that goes actually across Canada.
That's a fantasy trip for me. I haven't run that one yet, but
that seems like a marathon of adventure.
I'm so keen to do that. Because they're the challenges. People are going to come over, and I envision it's going to be retired Europeans who are going to be on that trip, because it's 35 days estimated.
Be like Goldwing or something with a big, huge leather seat on the back and big screen.
And what they're going to want to do is learn about Canada now. So now you're talking about Louis Riel, and it's a big company. Like, all of that story's got to be tied into that trip somehow. So it's going to be a fascinating trip to run the background.
And you'd expect to be the expert on the trip because you have a lot of history here.
Well, luckily, we've had a lot of riders come with us from all parts of Canada. So they have all said, okay, let me be the local hero for Northern Ontario or Southern
That'd be
Ontario.
awesome.
So we have a local guest guide. Stop by and tell his personal
go to his grandparents' place or something. That'd be a whole different perspective than just showing up at the world's biggest nickel or something. You're like, wow, I can go there anywhere.
The Goose.
The Goose, I can't go to Tim Francesco's parents' backyard for maple syrup in the snow or whatever. That's incredible.
That'll be a challenge for next year.
And so, a couple of final wrap-up questions here. If someone was going to plan a trip like the trip you did the first time, and they were going to sell everything they own and set off south and then north and then east and then west, what advice would you suggest that they heed from you or anyone else who's on the road?
So I think the big thing is not to get hung up on buying the gear. And this sort of a segue from our earlier chat about the bike stuff. I think there's more value in having money available to travel than having a lot of money on the bike and stuff. So sometimes people think that to travel that you need a certain amount of bike and a certain gear and a certain helmet camera and
climb on it,
all that kind of stuff. And once they buy that, the money left over is the money available for the trip. And I'm saying, well, you can rethink that and spend less money here and leave more money for this. But I can appreciate why they do it, because you're going to start a big trip like that. It's going to be scary. You have no control over any variable except for what you leave. And it takes someone with pretty big balls to see that I'm okay taking a used bike, I'm okay taking used gear, I'm okay taking an expensive camera or no camera, and leave that extra money. That's pretty bold, and I haven't met too many riders who have been able to do that. And so that'd be my one advice: is take less expensive gear and put more money into it. And then take more time, take as much time as you can. That would be the other part of it. I think there's two general philosophies of traveling: either going fast and seeing a little bit of the surface, or going slow and spending time in depth at every place you stop. And I don't think there's a good or a bad way of that's an individual.
As long as you go.
As long as you go. I think that the common denominator on those things is the more time you have on the trip, the more valuable the trip is going to be. So those would be the two. And go.
I feel like I agree with you there.
Yeah, and the other thing is to go. Like, there seems to be a big gap between I want to go, and then
actually going.
A lot of people are stuck on that.
I met a German guy in Botswana maybe 6 years ago now, and I was thinking about this trip forever, and he had driven from Germany, driving to South Africa, and I was blown away, and I'm like, I can't believe we did it. And I'm like, oh my god, what was the hardest part? He said, honestly? I'm like, well, yeah, obviously, honestly. He's like, leaving my fucking house. And I'm like, that was the hardest part. He goes, yeah, after that, it's easy. I'm like, the rest of it is, I'm like, oh my god. So I was sort of sold on the idea that the hardest part is actually leaving your house, which I found hard to do. Then the rest of it was easy, and once I got going, the rest of it was pretty easy, actually. So that was pretty
It is true,
critical.
because a lot of people look at these big trips like yours, and they'll talk to you and they'll say, okay, South America, I mean, they have no idea how to get to South America. So you say, well, hang on, you don't need to get to South America. You just need to get to Red Deer.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you get to Red Deer? Yeah, I can get to Red Deer. That's all you need to do. And then when you wake up in Red Deer, you just need to get to Calgary or Drumheller or wherever your route's taking you. So
it takes a little while to wrap your head around that, but that's very, very true. Yeah,
it's small, bite-sized pieces, and then into there.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, a little self-plugging. If someone wants to come on one of your tours, or wants to find you, or wants to ask questions about what we're up to, or is interested in traveling the world in this particular way, where can they find you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to use that old internet thing and email me at rene@renadian.com.
Yeah.
And if they are in, if they're going to be in Toronto, we'll be in Toronto. Well, we'll be in Vancouver next weekend for the motorcycle show there. Toronto, third week of February. Montreal, fourth week of February, or the end of February. And that will be the easiest.
You're the sales guy for all these events. This is you.
Yep. I'll be there in person. We'll be speaking at the BMW dealership in Ottawa, February 26th. And also we'll be in Vancouver at the Langley BMW dealership and also at the Vancouver BMW dealership. The dates I don't remember off the top of my head, but they're in April. So we're always floating around talking travel. We just want people to, we just want to remind them on the values of traveling, using a motorcycle to travel to see the world.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and just to go. So if there's some way that we can kick someone in the ass to make sure that they go, or just be a reassuring voice that says this thing that you want to do is a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, it's possible.
And it's possible.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. You don't need to be a millionaire. You don't need to do that.
You don't need sponsorship. You don't need a $20,000 bike. You can do a $4,000 bike. You can use a $2,000 bike. I've seen people.
You can use your neighbor's free bike.
Yeah, for sure.
But you just need to go, and everything else will fall into place. Because once you get onto the road, nobody cares about the bike you have. Nobody cares what kind of gear you're riding. These little people that you're visiting in Guatemala or Honduras or wherever.
Yeah.
None of that matters.
They thought my KLR was like a superstar bike, and I'm like, this is the shittiest bike you can buy. They're like, it's so reliable. And they were really impressed. I'm like, oh, they're impressed. I'm happy now. No one at home is impressed.
That's the trick.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. And I have one final question.
Yeah.
Since we're here, will you autograph my book?
Hey, happy to. Beautiful.
Just want to make sure it's documented on camera, so if I ever want to sell this, I have authentication that it's actually been done live in person on camera. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to us. Hopefully you increase sales and show more people the world. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what the future brings for Rene and the adventure motorcycle travel.
Thank you very much. It's been a very pleasant chat.
We just did this for another couple of
I was going to be on the spot. So you have to do it.
No worries. Well done. That's fun.
That's good. I think everything worked out great.